Okay, once again, welcome to Wichita Public Library. This is our Microsoft Excel Basics class. It's part of a four-part series. It's not really sequential after the first one. The first one is basics, and then the other three are just different topics. And they're going to be on Tuesday nights for the next 4 weeks at the same time. So welcome, everyone. What is Excel? Excel is a tool for lets us organize data, easily perform complex mathematical equations, link together information, and create charts and do a lot more. Excel is part of Microsoft Office, which is a suite of programs that includes Microsoft Word, which you may be familiar with. And all of the Microsoft Office programs feature what we call the ribbon, is the bank of commands at the top of the screen. The ribbon is organized into tabs, which are further organized into different groups. Most of the things we'll be doing are going to be on the Home tab, and most of the things you do at any time are usually on the Home tab. So though we won't spend much time on them today, I'll just do a quick overview. The Insert tab has a variety of things that you can insert into your spreadsheet, especially charts and pivot tables. The Page Layout tab is great for printing. The Page Setup group here, we're going to look at when we look at printing at the end, near the end of our class today. Things like margins and the way that things appear when you print a spreadsheet. The Formulas tab. This is the reason that Excel is so useful. There's all kinds of tools to make Excel do the work for you. The Data tab, there's different tools here to organize and summarize your data on the workbook, in a workbook. The Review tab does have methods to protect a worksheet. You can put a password, protect a worksheet or a workbook. Also, the spelling and thesaurus does have the spell check like all of Microsoft Office programs. And then the View tab is really about how it appears on the screen. You can zoom in to make things appear bigger on the screen. You can freeze panes, like the top row, you can freeze so that when you scroll down, the top row remains up there, which is useful in large spreadsheets. And then we'll go back to the Home. And then the File tab is not really part of the ribbon. That is your link to what we call the Backstage view, which is where you save and print and share documents or create a new one. So, as I said, within each tab, you have these different groupings. When we talk about printing and how things look, we're going to deal a lot with the font group on the ribbon here. If you have used Microsoft Word, you may be familiar with that. It's almost identical. Has the same types of commands there. And we're going to be using the editing group a little bit when we use, there's an AutoSum function we'll be using. So I'm not going to be relying on the PowerPoint here very much, but I did want to use it to, here's a list of class objectives. And there's a copy of this in the PDF format in the Google Drive folder that I linked to with the class materials. If you're able to follow along, this is the Google Drive folder I linked. You're going to want to use the Excel Basics personal budget spreadsheet, and you'll just hit the download button here, and you want to open it after you download it. If you double click here on the file, it's going to open it in Google Sheets, which will let you edit it actually, but it's a totally different program from Google, from Microsoft Excel. So I'd rather you didn't use it in that way. Just be sure to download in order to interact with that. This is more of a demo class. When we do it in person, there's more time for hands-on, but it's less practical in the Zoom format. So if you just want to watch, that's perfectly all right. Like I said, this will be on YouTube, and so you could come back to it and try to work along with it if you like at another time. Or if you have a double monitor situation, you're welcome to try to follow along here if you're comfortable switching between windows. So these are our class objectives. So a quick overview of the layout of the screen. I've talked about the ribbon. A spreadsheet is basically a grid made up of lettered columns along the top and numbered rows along the side. And this creates a grid. The intersection between a row and a column is a cell. And the cell address is made up of the column letter and the row number of a particular cell. There's a little box here in the top left, right below the ribbon, that gives the address. It's called the name box, but it gives the address of the cell. So as I click on different cells, you see it changes here. This is C10. The column letter and the row number are also highlighted on the edges there. So, and then across the bottom, there are some tabs here that are for different worksheets. So when we talk about an Excel file, we call it a workbook, but the specific sheets are here, and a workbook will have one or more worksheets within it. So you can add data to the active cell. The active cell is the one with the heavy green box around it. And you can move to any cell in the workbook by clicking on it. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move through your sheet. And if you're entering data, you might want to use the Enter key to move down to the next row. When I hit Enter, it moves vertically down the page to the next row. Similarly, the Tab button will move across to the next column. So if you're adding information and going down the page, you can use Enter to go to the next cell down. Or if you're entering data across the top, you can use the Tab button to go over to the next column. And the active cell value is not saved until you hit Enter or Tab or move to another cell. If the cursor is still blinking in a cell, then that value is not saved in that cell until you move or hit Enter or otherwise move from that cell. I'm going to go through one more slide on the PowerPoint before we switch over completely to our workbook. And that is the cursors to look out for. Whoops. So the main cursor, notice when I'm moving my cursor around Excel, it makes this sort of fat plus sign. That's the selection cursor. Notice when I've got the cursor blinking and I move the cursor over the text, it makes that sort of what we call an I bar, which is for selecting text. Otherwise, let me hit Enter and save that value in that cell. So when I notice when I move the cursor around, it does change based on what I'm hovering over. Of course, on the ribbon, it does the arrow. That's the default cursor for Windows computers. And then the selection cursor, as I said. And then there's when I mouse over the border to the active cell or selection, it changes to this four-way arrow, which is for moving cells. It's like the move cursor. Then we're going to talk about the AutoFill cursor and the Resize cursor a little bit later. But so what you can do with what's on the screen will change with what the cursor looks like. So the selection cursor lets me select a group of cells by clicking and dragging. And then when I let go, that selection remains. And if I mouse over the border of a selection, I can click and drag that and move it. So these cells were empty, but if I do that with this word text here that I typed into B3, when I move the mouse to the edge, it makes the four-way move cursor. Then I can click and drag and move that, and it's going to take that cell with its contents and move it to another address. Now it's on E5. And if I want to delete an entry there, I can just hit the delete button and it goes away. So today we're going to build a budget template or budget spreadsheet. We won't save it as a template. I may talk about some templates later, but this is going to be a budget spreadsheet. So go to A1 if you're following along. Otherwise, you're perfectly all right to just watch. I'm going to go ahead and type personal budget. And I'm going to move down the page. So I'm going to hit Enter. And then I'm going to move down a couple more cells, hit Enter a couple more times, go to A4. And then I'm going to type in the word income. So this is going to be my first heading for kind of a major division of the spreadsheet. There'll be an income, and then there'll be expenses, and the expenses will be in 3 different categories. So there'll be like 4 sections of this. So the first one is just income. And then we're going to list some different kinds of income. Start with wages, enter to move down, interest, enter to move down. And we'll have a miscellaneous category and move down. Then we'll have an income total. And move on down. And next we'll skip line 9, row 9, and start with expenses in A10. And the first category will be home expenses. So that's the next row. And in row 12, we'll put mortgage / rent. Row 13, utilities, and so forth. So I'm going to build this sheet slowly, but I have some of the other worksheets in this workbook. I've got some of the things completed, so I don't have to type through the whole thing. So the next one is the categories, and this just lists all of the categories. After the home expenses, there's the living expenses and a living total, or there's a home total above as well. And then a transportation group with a transportation total. And then the last two after another space will be expenses total and a row for over or short. I'm just gonna widen my screen here. I'll just go ahead and fill it. And I'm going to scroll back up and zoom in a little bit to make this a little more visible to everyone. So now you may notice that some of the entries in this column A are going over the lines. So we need to resize our column if we're going to see everything there. So for instance, now if there's something in the neighboring cell, it won't overlap. So let's say if I come down next to home improvement and type in 200 and hit tab to go over, you can see that it cuts off the home improvement. The value is still assigned to that cell, but it just doesn't, it's not able to display it because it's cut off for the next cell.
Oh, excuse me.
Bless you. Okay, so in order to change the size, we can use the Resize feature, which we see here as I move the mouse up between A and B. This is off the spreadsheet on the top row, which is sort of just the label row. When I go between two cells, it changes to the resize cursor. It's kind of a bold vertical line with two arrows left and right. That's an indication that I can click and drag that line to resize that column. And with a relatively short spreadsheet, I can kind of scroll down and resize it to the largest item and just put it where I want it. Now, that's not going to be practical if I have a spreadsheet with hundreds or thousands of rows. Luckily, Excel has a workaround for that, a shortcut, if you will. So I'm going to undo what I just did using the undo button up here. In the top left corner, we have what's called the quick access toolbar, and you can actually customize this, but by default, you always have the save button here. It's an old floppy disk icon. And then the back arrow is the undo, and it will undo the previous thing that you did. And you can do it multiple times to go back to previous versions of your sheet, basically. And then there's a redo, which is grayed out until you undo something. So I'm going to hit undo a couple of times because I resized it a few different times. And now it's back to what it was. And now you can see the redo button is no longer grayed out. I could redo the resize if I wanted to. But I wanted to show you this shortcut, and it's a simple matter of double clicking. When you see that resize cursor, if I double click, it automatically resizes that column to fit the longest entry in that column. So that's a really good shortcut, the double click for resizing the column. Okay, so moving on. Now we're going to set up, this is going to be a monthly or spreadsheet showing the months for a full year. So in B3, we'll type JAN for January. And so Excel does a lot of the work for you. And one of the things that it has programmed into it is sequences like the months of the year or the days of the week. And so I don't have to type out, if I was going to type these out, I would use the tab button to go over, and I could type February, etc. But instead, I'm going to use the AutoFill option. So here's my selection cursor, and when I mouse over the edge of that active cell, it changes to the move cursor with the 4 arrows. And when I mouse over this little tiny square in the corner, and it's very small, it changes to this small plus sign. That's the AutoFill cursor. And the little square in the corner, we call the AutoFill handle. So you want to grab the handle and drag it over. So I'm going to mouse over that little square till I see the AutoFill cursor. Then I click and drag over until I see December in the prompt there. So there's December, and then I let go, and it fills in all the months of the year, abbreviated. So it knows them spelled out too. Excel is really smart, and it's got a lot of stuff programmed in. It's designed to do the work for you. So that's a good example. We're going to be using that so many times today, the AutoFill feature. So now we're going to start filling in some numbers on our budget. So this first column here is income. That's just a header. The first numerical row is going to be in wages, and start with B5. And just for ease of use, we're going to just give everyone a budget of $2,000 a month. And now I could tab over and repeat it over and over, but instead I'm going to enter and save that value, and then click back on B5 and use that AutoFill feature to copy that value over. So in addition to sequences, you can use the AutoFill to copy values. And I'm going to drag over to December and now I've got 2,000 filled in for wages for each month. Now you may wonder, how does Excel know if we're copying or doing a sequence? Because Excel wouldn't really know if these were years rather than dollars. And the answer is it guesses, and it's really good at guessing. But if it guesses wrong, there's this little thing. See, I dragged it over, and there's still this little thing that goes down below, and it's the autofill options. And the drop down then gives me some choices. So this one, it assumed that I was copying cells. When it recognized January as a month of the year, it assumed that I was looking for a series. So here I can change, if the 2000 was a year rather than a dollar amount, I could say, no, you got it wrong, Excel, for once. This is fill series. And so I could change it. Now that would show a sequential autofill rather than a copying. But in this case, it guessed correctly. We wanted to copy the cells and have 2,000 all the way across. Okay. Now a couple more values before we get to the next step. We'll put in 0 interest and 0 miscellaneous for now. And now we want to do an income total. So for this, I'm going to step out of, stop sharing the screen. I'm going to use a whiteboard here. This feature, I actually haven't used this before, but we'll see how it goes. So here is my whiteboard, and I'm going to do some text around the middle. So Excel does math really well. All kinds of complicated mathematical equations it will figure for you. So basically, we're going to be talking about some formulas, a simple formula, which will tell Excel to do some math for us. So if you remember algebra, a basic formula might be something like 1 + 2 = x. But with Excel, it doesn't really, it's gonna need to reverse that and say x is equal to 1 + 2. Because these basically say the same thing, don't they? And the way to think of it is, what we're actually doing is we're saying this cell equals 1 + 2. Or let's say we're going to say that it equals, line these up, equals, for instance, A1 + B1. That is, we're going to want to add together the items that are in certain cells rather than just numbers. So the moral of this story is that you always start with the equal sign when you're creating a formula or a function. Let me close out of that. So, and share my screen again. My PowerPoint. Okay, so in other words, so if we're going to create a formula here to add up our income for January, we have to start with the equal sign. Now, as soon as I type an equal sign, Excel is now on alert for, okay, this is going to be some math or a function or something that I have to do some work for them. So, and we could type in 2000 plus 0, or whoops, plus 0, etc. But we don't really want to add the number 2000. We want to add the value of the cell in B5. So when I type the equals and then click on a cell, notice what happens.
Ben, we can't see that screen.
Oh, that's weird. All right, let me, okay. How about now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me back up a little. So we're totaling the income for January. And we're going to start with the equals to tell Excel that we're doing a formula or function. There's some math or some kind of calculation on the way. And instead of typing out 2000 plus 0, etc., we're going to click on B5 and notice what happens when I click there. In the formula, it fills in the cell address of the cell that I clicked on. And then I'm going to type a plus sign and click the next one, which is B6. And I type a plus sign again, and then I click on B7. Now you could type this out just as it appears. But I would encourage you when you're starting out to click on the cell that you want to calculate from, because you're less likely to make mistakes that way. Typing leads to typos inevitably, and it's a little harder to make a mistake when you're clicking on the cell that you want to calculate with. Then I'm going to hit enter and click on the cell again. Now it says 2000, but if you look up here, this is called the formula bar, and that shows the values that we input, equals B5 plus B6 plus B7. And notice when I highlight them or click there, it color codes the cells as well. I can also double click on that formula to display it right in the box where it is. So that is a formula, a basic formula. And I forgot to autofill these values here. So I'm going to do that now. And what about the formula? Do you think that I can autofill it across? Let's see. So I've got my active cell, I've got the fill handle there in the corner, the little green square. I mouse over it, I see the autofill handle and the autofill cursor, and I click to grab the autofill handle and drag it across, and see it has that plus all the way across the autofill cursor. And it looks like maybe it just copied them over. But look, if I click on one of these cells in the middle, you can look in the formula bar to see what the actual values in that cell are. And I can also double click down here, and you can see that for May in F8, it's adding F6 plus F5 plus F6 plus F7. So that's working. It's copied the formula over. The reason that it's able to do that is because these references are what we call relative references. And this will become important in a couple of weeks when we do a full lesson on formulas and functions. We will talk about absolute and relative references. But all you need to know for now is that your normal cell reference, like these are actually relative references, which means that we can copy the formula to other cells and it will give us a parallel construction. So you can see that it was able to copy these over because we have the parallel construction in each column. So now what's missing here? I was talking earlier about how does Excel know if these are years or dollars? And the answer is it doesn't, but it sometimes will guess. And so we need to tell Excel, but other times you have to tell Excel what's going on. And especially if you want it to display numbers in a certain way, you have to tell Excel what the format of those numbers should be. And that, so we can use the number group here on the home tab of the ribbon. There's a drop-down menu. You'll notice that throughout the ribbon, there are these little commands with the little triangle that points down. It's like a little arrow. And that indicates that there's a drop-down menu with a variety of choices. And we're going to use this for the number group. The drop-down is for the different number formats that we have. So there's general, which can use text or numbers, and it's no specific format, and that's the default. Then you have numbers with decimals, you have currency, accounting, short and long dates, time, percentage, etc., and some fancy ones there. But we're going to use currency. Now, some of my numbers aren't displaying right. When a number is too big for a cell, you see up here in the formula bar, it lists the value there. But if a number is too big, it displays these hash marks. I'm going to see if I can just zoom out and see if that will fit. So when I zoom out a little bit, you can see it fits. So it's just a matter of the way that it displays on the screen. The values are still there. So that is, I'm going to go ahead and resize these screens. I can, if you select multiple columns or rows, you can resize them as a group. And you can see I can drag it to resize it, or I can double click like we did before. Okay, so now we can move on. We did our months and our values. Let's see. I'm gonna pull in the values from this other sheet. I'm gonna copy that group, come back here and just paste those in here. And we can leave that 200 in home improvements. So again, we have an autofill opportunity here to go over, and I know that December is in row M. And I'm gonna actually select a whole group and see if we can autofill all of those at the same time. And turns out we can. Now, we'll just do a repeat of the home total with the formula, simple formula method that we had before. I'm going to just demonstrate. I start with, what do I start with always? I start with the equals because it's a formula or function. So I'm going to, this time I'm going to just type, and I put the caps lock on, although it's not really case sensitive for the cell addresses. I'm going to say B11 plus B12 plus, and this time I'm going to go back to the, so you can type those, but it's really better at first to click and let Excel put the cell address in there for you, and just type the plus in between and then click. And now I'm done. Those are all the cells I need to add. I'm going to hit enter, double click on that. And that looks good. I'm adding up all those that are adjacent there. And I just realized we don't have 200 in home improvement every month. It was just a January thing. So I'm going to delete those out of there. And then I'm going to autofill my home total across. And I'm going to put in 0 for the rest of home improvement values for each month. So you can see, if I double click here, you can see it's adding those. And then I hit escape and then double click in another one. If you happen to click into or double click in a cell with the formula and you accidentally hit the keyboard or something, don't panic. I can just hit the escape button and that will clear whatever I typed by mistake. It will just revert to what it was before. So if you type something by accident in a cell, just hit escape and it will clear what you typed. Also good for if you just make a mistake. But if you type something by accident. So notice here, let's say in June, we had to patch the roof and we had a big $500. Well, this is really imaginary money, but you can see that the values change based on whatever you put in the other cells here. So when I added 500, you see this is it's 1530 instead of 1030. So let us format our numbers properly. Again, we're going to go up to the numbers group, use the drop-down menu, and select currency. Okay. Moving on. Now, for this last couple of categories, I'm going to go ahead and autofill those values. Is there really nothing for eating out? What a sad thing. No, eating out was 60. Why didn't that? Oh, I see what happened. These got, when I copied and I just pasted, they were off by 1. So I'm gonna use the move cursor to move these down. One, that's right. Because that first row for living is just a category. That's the living expenses. All right, now I can do my living total. And it's important to know how to do a basic formula like we did here, but I was actually holding out. There's a much faster way to add up a column of cells, and that is the AutoSum button. It's here. It's in the editing group on the ribbon. And it's a special, and this is what we call a function, which is a preset or predetermined formula. And it has a special syntax of way that it's, and all functions have. But in this case, so instead of typing out or typing anything, I don't have to type equals or anything. I can just click on AutoSum, and it fills in with the sum function, and it guesses where my data is, and it guesses correctly in this case. And I just hit enter, and there's my sum of those cells. And as we'll talk about when we get to the formulas and functions lesson in 2 weeks, all functions have this sort of format where there's an equal sign, the name of the function, and then parentheses. And as we'll learn, there may or may not be something inside of the parentheses, but generally there are arguments or elements that we have inside of the parentheses. And in this case, the one element that we have is what we call a range. B19 with a colon to B21 means that's refers to the range from B19 to B21, inclusive. So it's all of those cells. And I'm gonna go ahead and autofill that again and double check my autofill is working for my function with the relative values. Each of these is just for that column. So if we had to change any of these numbers, it's only going to change that column value. And again, we will format as currency. And we'll do the same thing in the end in the transportation group. Click AutoSum. Now, you can select a different group. I could come up here and select these, and it puts those in. It'll put anything there that I tell it to. I can select all kinds of cells. So this is the range from E26 to I26. A range can even be square. Like this is a range from E19 to H21. It includes all of those cells from E19 to H21 and everything in between. But in this case, actually, Excel guessed correctly that the numbers I want to add up are adjacent to the cell that I'm in, and they're directly above in this case. It will also, if it doesn't find cells with numbers above, it's going to look to the left. So let's go ahead. I'm going to quickly autofill all of that and format it as currency. And I'm going to just show you how AutoSum works. If I click AutoSum in this cell, it's going to guess that I'm adding these numbers to the left because there's no numbers above it. So I'm going to click AutoSum, and there it does. it's guessed that I want to add B28 to M28. And then I hit enter. That gives me, there is a, so I could come up here and say annual total for that. So there's an annual total for public transportation, $30 a month, $360 a year. So yeah, Excel is pretty smart. It's not always right, but it's pretty smart. All right, so the last one, I'm going to zoom out a bit so we can see our income, or as much of the screen as we can. Let's see, this is 100, let's see, 110%. I'll move it to 100%. So we can see more of the screen. So in this case, now we have an expenses total. We want to add up our 3 categories of expenses. So as I pointed out earlier, just as a general kind of organization of this spreadsheet, we have an income group at the top. Then we have 3 categories of expenses. And here at the bottom, we want our expenses total. So we're going to create a formula. Now this is one where we have, we're adding numbers that are not connected, unconnected, or not contiguous is the word. That is, they're next to each other, they're touching each other, that's contiguous. These are not connected, not contiguous. So I'm going to type equals, I'm adding my expenses. My first category is the home expenses. And I'm going to click my home total, type a plus, then my living expenses total, and then type a plus, and then click on my transportation total. And there is my total expenses for January. And I'm gonna autofill that across to December, row M, column M. Now the last formula we're gonna do is gonna figure the difference between our income and our expenses. So we're going to take the income total, say equals income minus expenses total. That's it. That should give us whether we're over or short, how much money we have left, or if we don't have enough, what the shortfall will be. So I hit enter. And I've got $155 left over. Something looks off here. There's an extra row here that the home should be a category, not a number. So anyway, let's go. I'm not going to worry about that. It wouldn't be hard to fix. So here's my my numbers for, and notice, remember that in June we had to repair the roof, and there now we're actually $145 short in June. So if we're using this as a projection, we're going to maybe need to add some income there. But that is a budget spreadsheet with filled in formulas. So I could use this for next year and just come in and I could highlight all the numbers here and plug in new values. I just leave my formulas, I'll just leave here and then type in my new numbers. I'm going to hit undo because we're going to do some more stuff with this spreadsheet. The next thing, we want to make it nice. And I'm going to actually, we didn't plan on having the annual total on this spreadsheet, but you could certainly add it. I'm going to just highlight that and delete it to keep it clean for printing. We're going to see if we can print this and make it look nice. Well, first let's format it nicely. So the rest of the lesson today is going to be on formatting and printing. And if we have time, I'm going to show you some templates online that Excel offers that can be really useful and probably more useful than this particular budget spreadsheet. There's some really much more useful spreadsheets that they are templates that they have for budgets. So the first thing I'm going to do, I want to make this top row really stand out. So I'm going to select A1 over to M1. Remember, that's my selection cursor, and I just click and hold and drag and to select. And so I'm going to change my font. First of all, I'm going to do some things with the font group here. Change my font to Arial Black, which is kind of a bold font, sort of literally. And then I'm going to make the background or the fill color. It's this paint can with the yellow underneath. It's sort of like a highlight yellow, but I'm going to make the background or the fill color dark green here. And because the black text is so hard to read on the dark green, I'm going to change the font color to white. And I'm also going to increase the font size up to 28. And that's it. There, now it's a nice heading for my budget spreadsheet. Now for the income and expenses headings, I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to use the same font, the Arial Black, make it bigger, but not quite as big. I'll go to 24. And then I'll do a dark green, but not quite as dark. I'll do one shade lighter of the green. And this is in the theme colors. Notice down below, there's a set of standard colors, a no fill, and then there's more colors. You've got the whole sort of color wheel here. This is the standard selection of colors on a sort of a grid, and then there's custom, which is sort of the full range, plus a shading and a lightening slider button here. But we're going to just stick with the preset. Instead of no fill, we're going to use the lighter, slightly lighter green from the theme colors. And again, we'll change to the white font color. Notice when I selected white from the drop-down, the button changed to white. So if I click on the button instead of the drop-down, it's going to use white. So it'll basically default to the last color that you use there. Now this green is the slightly lighter dark green that I just used for the income. Now, another shortcut and this is a really useful one, so pay attention. I can copy this format and paste it, just the format, into another group. And in fact, there's a button just for that. It's this paintbrush, and that is the format painter. So I've got my cell A4 selected that has the formatting that I just did. And I click on the format painter, and then I'm going to select the row that I want to change, and it automatically paints that format onto those cells. And then it disappears, the paintbrush disappears. So notice also, so when I click on it, you see there's a paintbrush next to the selection cursor, that it's ready to paint different colors. But as soon as I click on something and let go, the paintbrush disappears. I'm going to undo that. If I double click the paintbrush, it lets me, whoops, I forgot to select my other different color. So if I double click the paintbrush, whoops, let's try it one more time. Double click, then I can click on multiple things to change them. But I actually only want those two to be different colors. And then if we move down to this other spreadsheets, I have, there's a pre-formatted one that's a final thing with lots of detailed formatting added. So you can see you can really spend a lot of time with formatting, just making things look nice. So now I want to talk about printing. And I'll just pause for a moment. Does anybody have any questions about what we've done so far? Feel free to post questions in the chat. Forgot to mention that. Happy to take questions from the chat. So for printing, we have to go to the File tab. Let's see, the AutoSum symbol is the FX symbol. Okay, so the AutoSum symbol is actually this, it's like an uppercase E. It's actually the Greek letter epsilon, which in mathematics is the symbol for sum. And then the FX button here is actually the insert function that will insert, it gives an insert function dialog, which we'll be using this in a couple weeks when we do the formulas and functions. That lets you type in a description of the function and get from the list of hundreds of different functions that Excel offers. So yeah, the AutoSum symbol is actually the epsilon. Good question. So if we're going to print, we're going to use the File tab to go to what we call the backstage view. And I'm going to select print. And it used to be there was a print preview button that was separate, but now they just always give you a preview of the print, and it's nice. It's a little more user friendly. They've keep improving it little by little in different ways. So in this print preview view, you've got a page numbers down here, and it's going on to 2 pages because it doesn't fit on 1 page. And it's using a portrait orientation, whereas I think if a landscape would work better. So there are some drop-down menus here. I could change the orientation here. I could change the paper size, and there's margins and scaling, which we're going to look at. But there's a link also here to page setup. And I'm going to go back into our spreadsheet to show you the page layout tab has a page setup group in it, which is really useful for printing. Now, in addition to these drop-down menus, I'm going to go ahead and change the orientation here to landscape. Also notice since I hit the print button, we've got a dotted line here that's showing where the page division is. So there's 2 pages showing the dotted line here between G and H, and there's a dotted line between P and Q. That's where the pages come out if we just printed it. Now, but I'm going to change the orientation to landscape. I see there's a question in the chat, which I'll get to in a moment. Now I changed to landscape, and you see there's now a dotted line between K and L. So it moved, it gave us a little more room, but it's still not going to fit everything. And it cuts off right before the last row. But I can also here change my margins. Let's go back to the print preview, which is just the print button, and off to File and Print. And you can see the margins are kind of your normal default margins, but we can make them narrower and see if we can fit more. So I'm going to go to margins, the margins drop down. Again, I'm on the page setup group, on the page layout tab, clicking the margins button. And this doesn't have a button, it's just a drop down. And notice there's some presets. There's normal, wide, and narrow, and then custom. And of course, custom will bring up the dialog box, and it's actually the page setup dialog box with 4 tabs. We're going to come back to that. But I can just adjust the margins here. Let's do narrow margins. Notice my divider line moved over, so it fit a little bit more. It still doesn't fit the bottom row or the last column. If I use this, in addition to the drop-down menus, the little arrows on these different buttons on the ribbon, in the group, you see there's a little sort of a square with an arrow. And that brings up a full dialog box. And the dialog boxes that pop up give you the most control over all the different elements. And this is the page setup dialog that you can also reach from the print view on the File tab. And actually, this has a print and a print preview button built in. So I'm going to go through, we changed to landscape here, and we did the narrow margins. And this also gives us an option to add a header or footer. So one of the things that we could do is put a page number. We'll say, let's put a page number in the top, and in the footer, let's just say we'll put our initials. I'm going to just do a custom footer, and in the lower right, I'll put my initials. Click OK. So I've got a page number, and actually let's do the custom header. We'll put the page number in the top right as well. And that's this one here, insert page number, click OK. And then the sheet tab. And again, this is the page setup dialog box, which I got to from the page layout tab on the ribbon. In the sheet group, there's an option to repeat rows at the top. If you have a long spreadsheet that's going to be multiple pages and it's all one spreadsheet with one row of columns at the top or one row of column headers at the top, you may want to repeat the column headers at every page so that you can know what the columns are. And that's what this lets you do. I can also add grid lines or not. This is separate from the cell borders that you can add in the font group. This is just, these grid lines would be kind of gray, not like the full bold dark border lines that you can add from in the font group. I'm going to leave those off, and I'm going to click OK. And let's go back to printing. We'll go back to the File tab and then Print. Notice if I click the page setup down here, you get the same dialog box, page setup dialog with all of those tabs. At the very bottom of these selection of options here, there's a scaling option, the bottom one. And I think this one, we should be able to fit it on one page. It's going to shrink it a little bit, but not so much that we can't read it. So I'm going to click on the fit sheet on one page scaling option. And it looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and, well, if I was going to print it, I would be ready to print it now. I don't really need this page number here because it's just one page, but I wanted to demonstrate how easy it is to add page numbers. And you could make it say like 1 of 10 or as well as just having the number. And you can customize, you could put a date in the footer in addition to initials or something. That was just another random example. So this looks pretty good. It's ready to print. All right, let's see. Our question from the chat. When you had the annual total column, it first was in all caps. I assume you had caps lock on. You did something to fix it. What did you do to fix it all at once rather than retyping? Let me see. I had the annual total. Let's say I'm going to do an annual total for our wages and go back to the Home tab and hit AutoSum. So functions are traditionally displayed with all caps. I'm not sure, or no, I know what you were talking about. You were talking about this one here. I said annual total. Did I have caps lock on? Annual. Okay, yeah, so this was an autocorrect feature. If I have the caps lock on and I use the shift to capitalize the first letter, it does, let's see, caps lock is on. I'm going to use shift, type the A, and then the rest of the word. So Excel is programmed to recognize when this happens and to recognize that it's a mistake, that you meant to capitalize the first letter and lowercase the rest of it. but you did the opposite, which nobody ever does. So that knows that as soon as I hit spacebar, it fixes it automatically. So, and it also turns the caps lock off for you. So that was that. It will make, it's like autocorrect. It's certain spelling errors will be corrected as well. Any other questions? So yeah, that is something is that something to turn on? And that is something you can turn on. If you go into File, again, this is the backstage view, where you also can save or save as. There's an options but at the bottom here. And in the options, it's, you can see, let's see, I think it's probably in advanced or proofing. Let's see, there's formulas, workbook calculation, automatic. Let's see, proofing. When correcting spelling in Microsoft Office programs, ignore words in uppercase. Language, let's see, advanced, editing, cut, copy, paste, chart, display. Well, it's here somewhere. I know it may be easier to find in Word because this is, oh, here we go, autocorrect options under proofing. Correct 2 initial capital letters. Correct accidental use of caps lock key. There it is. That's the one. So you can check that off or uncheck it. Auto format as you type. And then let's see, there's math autocorrect. You can put in some different symbols using certain codes. You can also replace the copyright sign with a C in parentheses. So yeah, you can set all of those things. Okay, good questions. And again, this is the options, which I got to from the File tab in the Backstage view. All right, so what if you want to create your own, a more usable budget spreadsheet? This one honestly is a little clunky, but it's good for demonstrating the things we were working on. But if I go into File and New, I can find a bunch of templates. And so for instance, and there's a search box here, and there's suggested searches. I can click on business to get a bunch of business ones. I can click on personal to get a bunch of personal type templates. And there's, you see there's a personal monthly budget. So let's just take a look at that. It gives you a sort of a preview with a description. And then I can click create. And these are really excellent. They have a little description. There's a whole tab here, or sheet page, which just says start, and it has a description of how to use it, what you can do with it, and then this actual spreadsheet. So this one, and it says create a personal monthly budget. In this worksheet, helpful instructions on how to use this worksheet are in cells in this column. Arrow down to get started. So and these are set up as comments. You can type in comments in Excel. And this gives you little descriptions of what just in that first column. So these are income totals, which is going to be coming from one of these other groups down here. Here is actual income, actual monthly income. There's just one row for, that's like our wages group. Then there's an extra income column. So you can put in your own numbers and it will update. And then you've got a projected and actual. Yes, I'm going to, oh, well, I'm not planning to email this. Actually, what I can do is I can email the link to when it's posted on YouTube. I can do that. The PowerPoint and the spreadsheet are in that Google Drive folder that I posted earlier. So this is one example. I'm going to do one more that I was looking at earlier. If I just type in personal budget. Let's see, this is simple personal budget. I think this is one that it's maybe the most, or kind of similar to the one that we did. Again, there's a tab or a spreadsheet, a sheet page with just instructions and just a description, and then the actual budget spreadsheet. So here we have income and expenses. And so this was kind of like our group, except this one, the expenses here at the top, these are totals that are coming from, no, this is home expenses. And then down here below, we have daily living, transportation, entertainment, health, vacations, recreation, dues, subscription, personal. It goes on, doesn't it? And then there's miscellaneous, and then you have totals at the bottom. And this is nicely formatted. So, and you notice at the end here, if we scroll over, you see it has like a little miniature graph for each one, and it's showing. So this starts out high and then it goes down. And that's because there's zero. There's no values in April to December. And the nice thing, I guess the one thing I can say, the thing about these is you can just edit them at will. I can just change the number, I can edit any of the fields to make it my own. Obviously put in my own numbers here, but the formulas, there are some of these that even show like a graph that is already inserted in there with the numbers, and all you have to do is fill in your values and it will graph your expenses by category in like a pie chart. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to don't need to save that. Here's our budget spreadsheet. And so this was our PowerPoint, which just wanted to show you. So here's an example of some templates and some stuff on formatting. There are keyboard shortcuts, which are are useful if you're on the computer all day and you're using the keyboard mostly. It's sort of time consuming to reach over to the mouse and click and do things. So Windows has a whole variety of keyboard shortcuts, which lets you avoid having to use the mouse. And the most common one is Control Z. That's the most common one that I use, and that probably the most common overall. That's the undo button. And it's Z because Z is in the lower left corner. So you can, with your left hand, you can hold down the Control button and then tap Z with your index finger. You can hit Control with your pinky and hit Z with your index finger, and just do that with one hand. And then other ones, there's Control Y is a redo, and this is mentioned. It redoes and undo, or it can repeat an action. So if you're going to change the font size in one cell, and you just do it by the command, and then you go to another cell and hit Control Y, it's going to apply the same font to that cell as the one you just did. So that's like a repeat as well as a redo, Control Y. And then cut, copy, and paste are always useful. Control X for cut, C for copy, and V is only there because it's next to C. Because when you copy, then if you copy, you're going to paste, and so it's just right next to the copy. That's why it says V. And then F1 is the help command. So if I come back to our spreadsheet and hit F1, it's going to, and it's put it in the wrong window, brings up your and I'm actually on Excel 2016. I could type in shortcuts here, and there's keyboard shortcuts, and that gives you a complete list of keyboard shortcuts. Here, actually, I'm gonna have to click this first one, keyboard shortcuts in Excel, and I can, and this gives a complete list of dozens, maybe hundreds of keyboard shortcuts, if that's your thing. And then a couple of resources. GCF Learn Free is a tutorial site from the Goodwill Community Foundation. It has really good tutorials. There's no ads. I'm going to go ahead and click through here. And have to bring the window over. I've linked to the Excel lessons. Here are some basics, and then working with cells and sheets. Each one of these is a lesson. So you've got understanding number formats, for instance. There's a video, and if you just scroll down, you can read the whole lesson with little screenshots, and it's very well done. And you can read it and then watch the video, or vice versa, and that will give you a really thorough overview of everything. And I've listed the lessons that kind of correspond with the things that we did today. So if you want to reinforce what we talked about, you can go back through these lessons at your own pace, read them, watch the videos, or do both. The other thing is, if you don't have Microsoft Office and don't want to pay for it, LibreOffice is kind of a freeware version of Office that well, it's not Office at all. It's a separate program, but it's free and it has a similar functionality. But it's a separate program. The spreadsheet program is called Calc, and it's LibreOffice. And I want to say special thanks to the Denver Public Library, which supplied the lesson plans for this lesson. They make them freely available on their website. And then here's the list of our other classes here. Please sign up if you're on the wait list. I will let you in. With Zoom, I haven't had a problem with too many people, so I will go ahead and let you into the class while we're doing it on Zoom. And lastly, there's a book a librarian service we have, which is one-on-one tutorial help on any tech topic that we teach on or that we are able to help you with. We will help you. And there's several of us that do these. So if you want to get a little more in depth in Excel, you can call and ask for me or send me an email and we can set something up. So thank you all for coming